So we're live.
Are.
All right. Welcome to Dungeon Diving here on this Sunday. This time around, we're doing Dungeon Diving DM's Tips. I am Metamongoose, also known as Ben. With me is Two Sword Samurai, one of our DMs here on the server, as well as Milk, or Fake Ted, as he is like to be called. He's also one of our DMs and our AV guy, and we will be talking today about we're just answering some Q&As, really. We put out a call for a whole bunch of questions so that we could kind of DM roundtable it, and we got a nice little pile of them here. And if you have any here that you would like to ask while we're talking, just put them up in the chat and we'll get right on those as soon as we work our way through the ones that were previously submitted. So with that going on, anyone have anything to toss in before we get started on the Q&A portion of this?
No, I'm good.
We love you.
We love you. Love you very much. Don't forget to follow, because at 100 follows, we're giving away that second generation player's handbook signed by none other than Gary Gygax.
That is true. We do have that on hand, and we are oh so close. We are at the 88 followers, so we only need 12 more.
Yeah, only 12. So let's get to it then. Question number 1. Each of you, what makes a good DM?
All right. Well, I'll start this one off. So importantly, number one thing that makes a good DM: willing to be the DM. I don't know how hard this is for a lot of people, but there's a minority of DMs to players in that ratio, and just being willing to step up and be like, I would like to run the game, already puts you on the path to being a good DM, because now you're a DM. So it's only uphill from here, right? From there, experience. No one starts off being the great DM. You will be a mediocre DM for a while.
Maybe even a bad one.
Well, I mean, you have to make a lot of mistakes along the way to be a bad DM.
Yeah.
Just starting out, just aim for mediocre. You will impress yourself and your friends, and then as your experience goes up from there, it can only get better. As long as you don't go out of your way to be kind of like that problem DM who becomes adversarial, or just kind of lets too much ego into the game, where like you start causing issues with the players by kind of forcing your way into things that are more like the player's realm.
Yeah.
If you can avoid those things and just kind of work and let your experience do things, I think that's a path to being a good DM. And from there, you just need some flexibility and some willingness to put in just the smallest amount of work, because just I'm not a real big fan of just the open up the book to random page, and this is the monster we will be fighting behind this random door style of DMing. But just being able to put a little bit of groundwork in goes a long way. So that's my beginning answer to how to be a good DM.
Good answer.
Don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Try things, experiment, but don't be afraid to fail. Yoda said, failure, the greatest teacher is.
Very, very true. It all comes down to effort. How much effort you put in is what determines what comes out. If you're inexperienced or you're experienced, you can still make a good product. It just depends on how much you're willing to do. If you're willing to work it with your players, if you're willing to sit down and prepare material, if you're willing to look over your source book notes or whatever you've written, you have to put the time in and the care, and you'll produce something good that you'll enjoy, that your players will enjoy.
So yeah, that's all around great advice. So all of you on your path to being good DMs, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Do not be afraid to be a mediocre DM for a while before you start getting the hang of things. But don't immediately think that right out of the gate you're going to be bad. You gotta go out of your way to be a bad DM a lot of the time. A lot of the time it's just being inexperienced, and the more you do it, the better you'll get along the way. You just got to be willing to stand up and start doing it, because otherwise sometimes it'll be hard to find a DM because everyone wants to be a player.
Everybody does want to play, yeah.
Just think, as a DM, you get to play with all the things. You get to be the monsters.
Yeah.
You get to be all the NPCs. You get to, you get more things to play with as a DM. So.
DMing is like having two people reenact Harry Potter, where one person's Harry Potter and you're everything else.
Right. But yeah, so that's just something to consider.
Let's move to question 2.
Do we want to field one of our audience questions now?
Did we score a new one in the audience?
We did. By Aaron.
Okay.
I thought we were gonna wait till after, but we can do it now.
We can fit one in.
What D&D rules do you like the least, or commonly adjust for games you DM, and why?
Two Sword, you wanna take this one?
Sure. I kind of adjust a lot of things. I don't like to use a lot of the really cumbersome rules unless it somehow enriches the game, things like encumbrance and food and water and blah blah blah. But, depending on your group and your setting, there are always all kinds of rules that sometimes can kind of gum things up. And so I think in most cases we kind of have to remember that Rule 0 of Dungeons & Dragons... Actually, no, Rule 0 is the Dungeon Master is in charge, right? Rule number 1 is that if there's a rule that's not fun, don't use it. So, you kind of have to judge every situation on its own merits. Like, if you're, going to play Descent into Avernus, maybe you want to include food and water and encumbrance and all that because you want it to feel weighty and heavy. You want it to feel kind of gritty. You want all of your players to realize that they are totally fish out of water. They have concerns that are above and beyond the normal.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So, again, with you, I definitely tend to avoid like encumbrance rules.
Yeah.
For that, it's just for the most part. But with when I was doing the Icewind Dale adventure that just came out, that's a lot of tundra survival. You've got to plan for long trips. You got to have a lot of food, planned and set up, and a lot of ways for survival stuff. So in that instance, I was like, guys, we're keeping track of rations this time. We're keeping track of supplies. And the party would be like, all right, well, I guess we're going to, blow all of our gold in town to buy like a wagon full of supplies. And I was like, all right, just so you know, now that you're out here with your big old wagon full of supplies, there are hungry people out here that want those supplies. There are kobolds that haven't eaten in a while that are very interested in your large treasure wagon that you have to park outside of a dungeon every time you want to go wander into the dungeon. And this is what you get for over preparing. So now you have to figure out, maybe you should find a happy medium.
Yeah.
Are you going to survive a blizzard?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, encumbrance is one of those rules that you really have to determine case by case. Like, unless you're going on a voyage of difficult nature or lengthy, it really doesn't make sense to track rations and water every day. It's just so bothersome.
Right.
Yeah, especially got a ranger in the party.
Yeah.
But then,
especially
if you're talking about Ghosts of Saltmarsh, Descent into Avernus, or Rime of the Frostmaiden, I think those three, it's kind of worth it because it really enriches the experience.
Or maybe if you're...
I don't know. I haven't been paying attention. Are you doing ration rules for Tomb of Annihilation?
Actually, yes.
Exploring?
We're keeping track of water.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
keeping
a good
track
thing.
of the water every day. The food, not so much, because the party has a ranger. But
Yep.
Okay.
The goop loves the food. Plus, we got a Venture Pygmy.
Yeah, I remember making some of my party definitely start keeping track of that after a while. Or at the very least, like, after a while out in the jungle, I'm like, you guys have been wandering the jungle for a few weeks now. How you doing on supplies? And they're like, oh, yeah, probably really low on those. And that definitely kind of enriched the experience for them a little bit.
I did scare them all into buying 60 days worth of insect repellent.
Dude,
You
that was
did,
funny.
and that was impressive.
That was really funny. So I think we wrapped up that question quite well.
Does that answer your question, Aaron?
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to question 2. How do you make a campaign or one-shot engaging for your players?
Well, on my end, it starts with talking to your players before the game to learn what engages them. It's a good start to all of that. If you want to engage your players, it helps to know what gets them interested. From there, it's pretty simple. You just got to keep the game moving. One of the things that drives down engagement is dead space, or like long boring moments where you've got one player who's doing too much and like a few other players who are just kind of sitting there waiting to see what happens, and maybe they're just checking their phone now because they've been they've kind of checked out of whatever's going on. So you kind of have to keep each player engaged in the story. But you'd be surprised how easy it is. Like for me, you have no idea how easy it is to get Kyle to do something by dangling something shiny in front of him for a few sessions.
Right.
So if I've got some players who are like, if I get them on a hook of something, and as long as I just kind of bring that up or drag it along, they kind of follow after it. And as long as it keeps moving the story forward, don't do something that if the party doesn't succeed on, like instantly kills all the momentum of the narrative.
Yeah.
Otherwise they come to a stop and then they get kind of, they just feel kind of put out, or they just kind of give up. Yeah. And at that point, like, they don't go any further. And then that kind of kills your momentum, and then that causes your engagement to drop in the story.
Deadlocked.
Yeah. You get stuck.
One of the cheap tricks that I like to employ is that I like to try to take character backstories and then weave them into the game, and then, have elements from their backstory show up, as we're playing. Yeah, I'm like also kind of a sucker for mechanics. I'm a big mechanics nerd. And so I'm not above making custom subclasses and races and stuff like that for my players, because I want them to be invested in their characters.
That's
getting character buy-in really is helpful.
When your players feel connected to their characters, they play the game so much better. Like, it's important to make sure that the players are playing the character they want to play. Otherwise, you have situations where players try and kill off their characters. Which could slow the game down.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely get your characters engaged in things. So that's, as long as the players feel like they have, stake in the story, they will bend heaven and earth to keep it going, as long as they've got investment in it.
Right. And again, effort, plan, and keep things moving.
Cannot stress that one enough.
If you have a
plan, there is no
substitute
substitute for good preparation.
And you keep the game moving, like you keep turns very concise, then you'll have no problems moving that game right along and keeping the story flow. Anyone else want to add anything?
No, I think that pretty soundly covers that one.
All right, so then we'll move to question 3. Is improvising or planning better when making and running a campaign or a one-shot? Well,
I don't think you can really compare the two.
you can't. I think it's important to do both. Because
I
there are
agree.
times when your players will pull off track, do something that the DM can't expect, which happens quite often, and you need to come up with something. But the plan is important for helping you get back on track after you deviate. You
Right.
still need to do your preparation. You can't just
The
leave it open-ended
right.
because you're just going to get lost.
Yeah, improvising isn't bad. In fact, that's how this game functions. Um, you're putting out a task, your players are improvising, you are then improvising based on what they do. There's a lot of that. However, having a good structure in place around those moments of improvisation really help to kind of keep things from going off rails. Um, like just, if it's okay to have the story kind of turn completely differently from how you had planned, but don't let it like wreck the whole like narrative that you were building. Definitely the plans that you have in place kind of help give you some structure to fall back on when you're dealing with having to come up with how your players have kind of taken things one direction or the other. They're like I said, planning and improvising, two very important pillars, I think, and shouldn't really be kind of at odds with one another.
Yeah, you got to be able to roll with it.
Yeah.
The way that I usually like to run campaigns is I kind of let the players decide where they want to go and what they want to do, and that unfortunately means that you have to prepare a whole lot of things because they could go a whole lot of ways. Taking Tomb of Annihilation, for example, there are so many things that the players can get into on Schult.
Right.
You got to be prepared.
A lot of options.
That means a lot of homework.
It is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It
When
pays-
when I did Tomb of Annihilation, so people were wandering around Schult. How I handled it for the most part was whenever my players got to a location that was an adventure point on the map, from that point, I basically read up on or prepped for about 3 or 4 adventure points that were nearby,
Yeah.
and I didn't know which one they were going to go to.
Bingo.
But I knew roughly kind of how to handle the next 2 or 3 nearby points, so that the game could kind of continue no matter which kind of direction they wandered off in,
Yeah.
It's basically
without having
exactly
to
how
stop
I'm
and be
running
like,
it.
well, I have to reread this whole section because I didn't plan for you to go this way.
Yeah. That's where the experience comes in, When you're first starting out, it might be a little bit hard to adjust that quickly. And that
But
just
you'll learn.
You'll learn. It comes with experience.
As a newer player with Tomb of Annihilation, I would suggest like staking out the adventure points ahead of time that you're kind of interested in, and then having the NPCs the players run into kind of lead them those directions. Maybe like don't like force them those directions. Like don't make it like a straight up, on rails, like you can't go whatever direction you want, but kind of like nudge them those ways in, like, maybe there's some cool treasure over here. We've heard legends of some great power in this direction. Something that gets the players excited to go those ways.
Yeah.
But don't like force them. But like that's how I would do it as a newer DM, was just be like, all right, I read through all the like adventure points. These are the ones that are interesting to me and maybe my players would have fun with. As we run across NPCs, as they hire new guides to get them through the forests, these are the places that the guides are going to kind of lead them, or these are the ways that like NPCs they run across. These are the local legends that the NPCs might know about, because that way you can kind of direct your players different areas without it being too much of a hassle.
Yeah. I think you got that one covered pretty well. So we'll move on to question 4. What DM resources do you use?
Long story short, all of them.
All of it.
Yeah, there is not a resource that exists in print or on the internet that aren't immediately usable in some way, shape, or form. I mean, for ease of use, look, D&D Beyond is a great resource. They have digitized everything. Their search features not terrible.
Pretty handy.
The more stuff you buy, the more stuff you can find and dig through. That's their business model. It's not a terrible model. But if you're looking for like free resource stuff, there's like a Don John website.
Yep.
It's like donjohn.bin.sh or whatever. They have a lot of like tables and resources that are really helpful. The one resource that I especially enjoy is npcgenerator.com. If you've never been, make some time. If ever, as a starting DM, you need your hands on a fun resource.
Hold on.
Where you can just... Oh, we haven't... Oh, is the bot being mad that we're posting links?
Whatever.
Yeah, hold on. I'm just gonna mod Kenichi.
Did you plug 5e.tools, or are we not allowed to do that?
I mean, you can.
Oh!
I don't know.
That's...
Well, let me post a link. Haha. So there's this one, and...
I'm also a really big fan of Kobold Fight Club.
Kobold Fight Club, also very good. And then let me toss the NPC generator on here if anyone's interested.
Hold on.
So those are some of the web links that I go to if I need for like a table or like a encounter calculator. Yes, D&D Beyond has an encounter calculator. It's still kind of in beta, and I'm not the happiest with it. I can't just put stuff in and it spit it out in a way that I would like. But these are all some places and things that are helpful. And you know what? Get lost in Pinterest for like 12 hours. That is a place that you can find fun art for all of your gaming needs, for your character design needs, for your monster needs, for your magic item needs. Like, just get lost in Pinterest forever. Like, it'll be fine. You'll come out a better person in the end, I promise.
Yeah, I do recommend, I can't drop the link right now, but Asgar's Fantasy Map Generator, if you're generating large-scale maps, that's a great resource.
I think Incarnate, INK Incarnate, is also a pretty solid system to store stuff on as well.
And then the other one that we didn't mention is other DMs.
Yes.
Especially more experienced DMs, because people that have been DMing for any like amount of time greater than you will always have ideas and tips for you to use.
Right. And chances are they will also have like a billion ideas that they themselves never got to use. Mm-hmm. And whatever situation that you're like developing may fit an idea that they had but never got. So they will happily be like, use this, please. You know, this thing that I wanted to do never got to happen, but your game would be perfect for it. Here's some information.
Yeah. You can learn a whole heap of stuff from other DMs. Anything else you guys want to add?
Just the books.
Yep, books.
Definitely spend some time reading the books.
And not even current edition books. A lot of my better resources come from like second ed era stuff that I still have sitting on my shelf.
Yeah.
Or like third ed or fourth ed era stuff that's just sitting there, because that's all good material too, one way or the other. Like you may not be using it for its intended purpose, but you can definitely, you know, use it to spice up your games or give you interesting ideas of how to do things in other parts of your game.
Yeah, and if you're looking for lore-based material, the D&D wiki do you just fine.
Right. Like the D&D wiki or the Forgotten Realms wiki,
Yeah,
both those very, very exhaustive.
yeah. Number 5. How do you deal with problem players? What is the best way to deal with an aggressive or disruptive player?
So the best way, just talk to them. A lot of people don't realize that they are a problem player, early on, or they may not. Maybe they just don't realize it. Maybe, like, so just talk to them. You don't have to like call them out, in game in front of like everyone else, but like after game or before game, just just pull them aside and be like, hey, this is a game, we're having fun. This is not making the fun happen. The thing you're doing, please edit your, what you're doing that's causing the problem, uh, and go from there. That usually will solve a lot of the problem. Just letting people know, because some people just don't. I mean, look, in our hobby, there are stereotypes of folk, and some people just don't know that they cause problems. And just letting them know is a good first step.
Yeah,
That
letting them
usually
know
resolves it.
that usually does it. And if it doesn't, then, further action.
Don't be afraid to ask them to leave at that
Don't
point.
be afraid to tell
Like,
them to leave the table. Because what's most important is the game as a whole. Your enjoyment and the other player's enjoyment. And if one person is being a hindrance to that after maybe 1 or 2, maybe even 3 conversations about it, don't be afraid to just say, I'm sorry, I don't think I'd like to have you anymore. And you can do that and not feel bad about it.
Yeah.
If you guys want to add anything else. Actually, yeah. If you want to,
generally, once you get more experienced as a DM, you'll be able to begin to notice problem players early on. So, you can kind of head some of these problems off early, especially if you get to kind of pick and choose your players. But if not, like, you can kind of have those conversations sooner, before they become a big issue.
yeah. And if you're looking to, like, if we're talking specifically about the people who want to do everything on one turn, just maintaining a bit more control over the turn order will fix that for you.
Right. Don't be afraid to be like, yeah, that seems really cool, and we'll get to some of that, but you can only do so much of that right now.
Yeah. The player handbook says it best. The DM is a referee. So I think that that sums it up quite well. Question number 6: how do you reward players without unbalancing the game or causing power creep?
Two Sword, how do you handle that? I know how I handle it.
I do have a lot to say about this one. So I like to reward players in kind for their efforts. But then, you got to make sure that one person or one player doesn't get all Monty Hall, right? And that's, I don't know. I mean, as long as you're not over generous, usually that's not an issue. It's not that difficult to balance encounters or whatever. Personally, what I like to do is I'll start at the very beginning when a character writes their backstory. I'll usually give them like a common magic item, it's usually just something for flavor that reflects their story. And sometimes I go so far as to make custom one. I had a girl who was playing a monk who had taken a vow of poverty, and she spent a lot of time writing her character's backstory. And so the common magic item that I gave her is this thing I call the Beggar's Purse. It's a purse that's always empty. If somebody tries to pickpocket you, whatever, there's never any coins in there. But if somebody comes to you with genuine need for a little bit of money, you might find some coins in it.
That's awesome. That's a great item.
Yeah, I was pretty proud of that one. But then,
Yeah,
that goes on, from start to finish throughout the entire campaign. You just got to make sure that you reward characters in kind for their efforts. That's always my philosophy.
Give players items that would suit them. You're not going to give a level 5 player a legendary item or an artifact.
That's why we have tiers, right?
That's why we have tiers.
Right.
Like, you're going to give like a level 5 player maybe a nice uncommon magic item. That would work well.
Also, things to consider. So a lot of DMs tend to forget that the trinket table is a thing.
Yeah.
The trinket table is a pile of weirdly, slightly magical things that are not game breaking, but just weird enough to hold some players' interest, right? Like you get a cool thing here or there, and the players are kind of interested in this weird contraption that they have, and maybe they latch onto it, and maybe that's enough to keep them happy.
And
If
maybe
it's
you write
not,
maybe you write a hook for a little mini adventure or something.
right.
Right.
And even then, if that doesn't do the trick, consumable items or one use like blessings, things that are cool but temporary. That way they don't unbalance the game, because it may be a powerful effect, but it's only a powerful effect once, or it's only a problem one combat, and then after that, they feel that they have gotten a reward because they got to do something, but then you kind of pull back to the status quo without it being that big of an issue.
Yeah. It's especially easy for clerics, warlocks, and paladins. You can, if they're playing well, if they're, really role-playing their character well, just give them a blessing from their patron. It's like a super simple, easy way to reward those players specifically for, embracing their patrons.
Right. Or even just like as a party reward for doing something. Like maybe the local, like wizard or something gives them like a little magical buff that's usable like once or twice and then goes away. But, that's it makes the players feel like they're getting something cool. And then if you're lucky, they also, suffer that problem like most RPG video games have, where like you get the cool item and then it sits in your inventory forever because you're afraid to use it.
Yeah.
And then it's not. Yeah, it'll be helpful later. We don't want to use the thing now. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess the game balance is maintained because you're afraid to use the consumable item.
Yeah. Definitely, you could have players stocking the magic items.
You also might want to consider like legacy style weapons that kind of grow with the player.
Those are fun.
Like you get, you start off with like maybe a +1 magic sword, and at the end of like the adventure arc, like the first arc, it upgrades to something slightly cooler, and as you and then that way it can grow in tiers with you, so that the player is not always like looking for the next coolest item. They're looking to move the story along to help make their item cooler.
Yeah, that's a excellent tool to use for player motivation, as well as power increase.
Yeah, and it scales appropriately with level.
Right.
One of the things that time for more of Kenji's cheap trick. One of the things that I threw in with Tomb of Annihilation is that Kyle's character is playing a fighter loosely based on the Belmont line.
No, it's not loosely based. It is Trevor Belmont.
Yeah, he changed the name.
Yeah, that's about
But in any case, what I did is I put a bunch of the Belmont-style whips in the game for him to find, as the game goes on.
Yeah, he just got the Thorn Whip, if I recall.
Something I did for him that you may want to consider. In the Theros book that came out, there are weapons. They use the artifacts for like their examples, but like weapons that use a piety system to get cooler, the more I guess more piety points you acquire,
The more devotion you show.
the more devotion you show. Now I turned it. Now he's playing kind of like a fighter paladin thing in my game, so it was really easy for me to just be like, all right, here's your god's precepts, follow those. but on like a Belmont style like family thing, like anything that he would do that would further his family's name in the world or something might like get him like a house point or something that could work on that towards some of those whips to make them from normally cool to like extra cool. I don't know if you've had a chance to look into that, but you may want to consider it.
Well, there's a series of them is what I've got so far.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. There's
And,
several.
you know, one of
several
the things
whips.
that I've kind of really wanted to work into that campaign, and of course, I've been trying to bring this up with the other dungeon masters, but we've kind of been all over the place over recent weeks, is that when this campaign is over, assuming we all survive, we will all be around like level 11. And I'm kind of hoping maybe to take us to Tomb of Horrors thereafter.
Oh,
And,
okay.
if we have like some kind of backstory or whatever, that all of us are trying to find a Serac, and then we're trying to find these magic items so that we can better prepare ourselves for the journey to the Tomb of Horrors or something.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good time.
Then all of these backstory, house points and magic items and all this stuff are kind of put towards this, war effort against the Serac.
Right. Anything else?
No, I think that covered that pretty well.
Then on to question 7. How do you approach world building? Do you start big and focus down to detail? You start with an end goal and build the world out to get to that idea. I'll start with this one.
Yeah, I'd like to hear how a newer DM does there.
You don't have to go all the way down to the ittiest bitty detail. It's exhausting, especially in larger scaled worlds. You're gonna waste. I don't want to say waste. You're gonna spend hours upon hours of time putting in detail that you might never see. I think it's important to get general information, like maybe government type, like population, like race majorities, information that would be relevant to your party. And then like Tolkien did when he was writing Lord of the Rings as a bedtime story for his son, he didn't have any of the details. Like, it was his son that said Bilbo's door was blue, and then he just wrote that down. Like, you don't have to come up with all of the stuff right away. If you decide in game, like, oh, well, I have this tavern location, maybe the walls are made out of brick. That doesn't have to be planned months in advance. You just say the walls are made out of brick, you know? You don't have to necessarily have names for everything right away. You don't have to, like, spend so much time in world building everything. Like, do the important stuff.
Your players aren't going to see 99% of that work.
Yeah, do the important stuff. And then as your players progress in certain areas, you can refine the amount of detail where the players are instead of where the players might be.
Unless you're writing a source book.
Unless you're writing a source book,
right.
But that's a different story.
That's for later, I guess. Unless you're, I don't know. If by chance you happen to be writing a source book,
yeah, you need to detail everything. You'll want all the information because it's a source book. It's supposed to tell you everything. But no, if you're writing an adventure setting, you don't necessarily have to go to great lengths to detail every little thing.
Just what's important.
Yeah, no,
just
for my stuff, I tend to start local. So like, the party is going to be in a town. Just have like a little description of the town, maybe some NPCs they care about. Let the adventure kind of spill out as it will, and then depending on where they go from there, kind of develop the map, develop the world as they see the world. If they ask questions about the greater world, that's a good time to kind of develop those things. Maybe you have some like broad stroke ideas, like, maybe there's like an elven empire somewhere, or maybe like a certain region is known for some dark event. But like, unless your party goes and your players go like out of their way to want to interact with an area, don't overdevelop the area. Only kind of give them the information that they need, that they're kind of looking for, and then afterwards kind of develop it a little further in case new information needs to be required for that spot. But don't like develop an entire world and then your party only gets to ever visit like less than 10% of it anyway.
Yeah,
Because that's just a lot of extra work. Don't work harder than you have to.
Yeah.
Smarter, not harder.
Prepare, but
Right.
you don't need to go that far.
Because I know people who have written like entire campaign worlds and drawn out maps and worked out family trees for their nobility lines like 10 generations back, and the legends of the world with all of the, and I'm like, so how much of this is your players like interacted with? And like, almost none of it. I'm like, then why did you do it?
It's okay to write these kind of things for yourself.
Right.
But you can't expect that your players are going to walk into all of it, because it's a little unrealistic.
Like, accept that you are writing that stuff for you.
Yeah.
And don't be angry at your players if they don't know about this stuff, or don't interact with a lot of it because you went out of your way to like write all this extra stuff that they may not interact with at all.
For example, in 2 hours I'll be running the Sunday one shot. It's a custom setting. There's an entire world there. They know about 2 nations in it, and they've only been to 1 town in one of them. Do they need to know about everything else? No, because they haven't been there. They don't know about it. They don't need to know about it until they get there. And so I haven't done any detailing into it, because it's not relevant yet. So you need to pick and choose what you want to spend the majority of your time on. Any other comments?
Yeah, no, that pretty well sums that up, I think.
So then we'll go to question number 8, almost at the end of the list. How do you handle a group that wants to play mess with the DM over advancing the story campaign?
So my advice, first off, set expectations very early. This is what your session 0 is for, or this is what, be like, this is the kind of game we're looking for.
Bingo.
If you go in expecting this kind of game, I need your buy-in or else this isn't going to work. Now, once you start getting those players who, who want to turn the game a little more adversarial, where it's like the player to try to make it more players versus DM, or go out of their way to, kind of see where the plot is going and do everything in their power to turn the game away from that because they, are doing it because they think it's fun, to derail the game as much as possible to see how you solve for that problem. You again need to have a sit down and explain to them, look, while this particular little game of cat and mouse may be fun for you, as the DM, I am not having fun, and we need to work something out or else we just can't play this game. So like, you just got to be upfront with some people when player troublemaking is causing an issue in game and or disrupting the game as a whole.
Indeed.
I believe the appropriate modern proverb is no D&D is better than bad D&D.
Right. It's if your players are starting to try and derail the game, then first you need to communicate with them, but also you can just work right around that. Like, you're only limited by your creativity. If they want to avoid the plot, you just bring the plot to them.
Right.
In ways
the
that
only
they
time
may,
where that becomes a slight issue, though, is like if it starts becoming like a weird Cold War scenario between you and your players, where like you keep trying to bring the horse to water, but they'd rather drown than drink it. So you gotta, at that point, you have to kind of examine it. Maybe the plot isn't sticking with them. Maybe and this is again how you kind of have to talk to them and be like, is something I'm doing not interesting you? And if that's the case, is it something I can change? If it's just that you guys are, doing this just because you think it's funny to constantly like derail everything, that's on you, and we need to change it, or else we can't play.
Or are
but
you
if it's
bored?
a problem where something I'm doing isn't working for you guys, I need to know, or else we're going to keep this game of me trying to bring you the plot and you constantly trying to avoid it, and it's all going to go wrong. So you gotta talk to your players. Again, setting expectations early is a good start. But yeah, I'm much more of a fan of like just letting everyone know what the deal is, and then if it's not working out, talking to them and being like, is it something I'm doing or not doing? And if so, I can fix it. But if that's not the case, then we just need to not do this anymore.
Yeah, I don't really tolerate purposeful derailment at my table. And you really can't, because once you start allowing that at your table, you ruin the game for yourself. And it can make DMing not so enjoyable. So definitely keep an eye out, and if your players are pushing in that direction on purpose, it's okay to stop the game. After all, it's a game. Everyone's supposed to be having fun, and if that's not what's happening, then
Right.
it might be better for you.
Everyone needs to be having fun,
right?
Even the DM.
The DM
like
is,
the DM's
is also
job is
a
to
player.
help bring fun to the players, but the DM also needs to have fun, or else this game doesn't work.
Right. Kenichi.
More often than not, I think it's usually the dungeon master who's the adversarial one. But if you have an entire group of players who are being adversarial, yeah, you need to take steps to correct it.
Right. Yeah, don't be the dungeon master who is in this to be like adversarial to your player. It's not your job to, don't go
to
out.
Beat the player.
It's not your job to hunt your players and kill them. It's your job to tell a fun story that gives them a sense of danger here and there. But like don't be the guy who's like, you can make whatever character you want. I'm gonna kill it because I'm the DM and I have the power to do the things. And I'm just like, no. This is how you become a bad DM.
Don't be upset if players kill your big bad evil guy or something doesn't go exactly how you thought it would. That's just natural.
Well, they're supposed to kill your big bad.
They're supposed to kill the big bad evil guy.
That's how the story is supposed to go. And if everything goes according to narrative structures, they're supposed to kill him.
They're supposed to kill him.
Or whatever. And if they don't, that's fine too.
That's fine too.
He can get away. Like that's how bad guys work.
Sometimes I make my bad guys run away. In fact, in a lot of source books, hostiles flee. Quite often.
Smart villains always have an exit strategy.
Right. Like it's okay to make your hostiles leave.
So yeah, that's something to kind of keep in mind. Like, it's okay for your players to win. That's what you wanted them to do in the first place. Because if they all lost, then the game ends because they died or whatever.
Ooh, we got a follow bot.
We had a follow bot.
We had one.
But yeah, no, definitely try to avoid becoming an adversarial DM, and hopefully that will encourage your players to not also be adversarial. Players.
Yeah, your job as the dungeon master is to be the referee.
Yeah. You're holding the reins and letting the players pull you along, but you're also guiding them.
Right. It's definitely not a you versus them mentality.
No. It's a mutual relationship. It's a push and pull between the DM and the players.
Symbiotic storytelling.
Yes, we love it. Anything else on that question? Oh. So then we're gonna move on to our final written question, and that will be, what is the best online virtual tabletop platform to use for setup?
So I'm gonna mostly let you two go over this one if you want, because I am a big proponent of live tabletop play.
Well, yeah,
Best.
it is the
But
best.
now,
Nothing beats
granted,
it.
in today's like digital environment, there are lots of options. One of our DMs, Romulus, is a goddamn wizard at Roll20.
I stole the power. I took
And
everything I could from
like
that man.
it is an amazing thing to watch Roll20 when it's being used by somebody who knows how to use it properly.
It's incredible.
Foundry virtual tabletop is a thing. Mostly I'm cool with just honestly like Discord voice chat.
Yeah, theater of mind.
And just kind of describing things, occasionally picture here and there to help the players, but you don't have to get super fancy. You really don't. But for those of you who kind of want to, do either of you have any virtual things that you've dabbled in that would be helpful?
Yeah, it's Roll20 is great. There's a bit of a learning curve there. But again, one of the greatest resources that you can have is other DMs. And like I said, I talked to Romulus about it, and he was willing to give me all of his insider info. And now I'm confident that I can produce something of similar quality. So I think Roll20 is really versatile. If we're looking at some of the other options, Tabletop Sim I think costs like $15.
That's my favorite.
It's really cool to use. There's a lot of stuff you can do with it. Tailspire is also there. I haven't used it yet.
That just dropped.
That just dropped. I know there's some other Kickstarter stuff that'll be coming out. But if you're looking for something that's free immediately, I recommend Roll20.
Yeah, Roll20 is a really good resource. You know, it has some good compatibility with D&D Beyond.
Yep.
You can just roll your stuff from D&D Beyond and it shows up in Roll20.
Yeah,
It's pretty good for that.
I did see in the D&D Beyond forums at some point a while back that somebody was like developing a virtual tabletop that like integrated seamlessly with like D&D Beyond. And I saw like the alpha version of that and it looked kind of neat, but again, like virtual tabletops just really aren't my thing. So I didn't like pursue it too heavily.
I'd love to learn how to run a tabletop sim game, but
I'd be more than happy to show you. So let me talk about my experiences very briefly with Tabletop Simulator and why I
go
like it
for
so
it.
much. My most favorite thing is picking up actual dice and rolling them, and
Yeah.
none of the other tabletop sims have that. But because Tabletop Sim has an actual physics model, you can pick up any number of dice and huck them across the table. You can do the same thing with minis and your character sheets and all that. You can have, whatever kind of background you want. You can fade out certain areas. It doesn't quite have a fog of war. It's like the one feature that it's really missing. But everything is scripted in Lua. And so I've figured out how to set turns. And so like when it comes to somebody's turn, it plays their character's theme song, and
yeah, that
one of the
stuff's
things
really
that I like
cool.
to do is whenever I DM Curse of Strahd, I like to have everyone pick a theme song from one of the Castlevania games. They really dig it. But also one of the other things that I do is one of the things that you can put on any figure or any object is basically like an aura, and so that'll show like what the range of your spells are and stuff like that.
That's
So
really
there's lots
neat.
of
That sounds pretty cool.
lots of cool tricks that you can employ.
I wonder if you can
I really dig
implement
it.
some of that stuff in Roll20, because I know Romulus showed me how to do that really cool initiative thing where it focuses on whoever's next in the initiative order. It has the aura around them. I wonder if you could do that with like spell range on the map as well.
Don't see why not. I mean, it has a built-in rangefinder.
Yeah, it's I'm pretty sure the API uses HTML. So I don't know how I would write that.
Well, if you had another graphic that was kind of like the turn marker aura,
yeah,
but it was just like a ring, and then you have it set to a certain size.
Yeah. Yeah, you could probably do that. But I definitely love to run tabletop sims sometime. Because that sounds quite interesting.
It's pretty fun.
So yeah, I maybe if it goes well, we'll see how that plays out.
We're just at the end of the time, I believe. We're at one. Oh no, we
I
we
think
have we have
so.
5 minutes. We have about
Yeah,
four.
we have a few more, but yeah, I don't see any other immediate questions in the chat. Milk, do you have any questions for us?
Oh, wow. That's a good question.
Here in these last
How
few
would
minutes?
you say that playing earlier generations influenced your experience with 5e? Because I only played 4 for a very short amount of time before 5 was released.
So, of the previous generations for me, fifth edition is most analogous to second edition. The materials, the kind of terminologies, a lot of the feel of it is very second ed, but like cleaner. Like instead of a whole bunch of like dense tables that don't necessarily make sense and parts of your character sheet that math in like different directions for no good reason. Um, they basically, it feels like they took second edition, cleaned it up, took some of the lessons that were learned in third and fourth edition to kind of like streamline things and make it simpler on just play in general. And so with fifth edition, I was very comfortable with it when it came out, just because of the older edition play that I had done.
Kenichi, what about you?
If I could
And I
expound on
know
that
I know
just
a lot
very
of people harp on fourth edition, but I was watching the development of fifth edition, a lot of like underpinnings and good lessons that were learned during the fourth ed era make fifth edition about as good as it is today.
bingo. So I think second edition really, because there was such a huge time gap in between when second edition dropped and when third edition dropped, the world was so fleshed out. There were so many source books and there was just so much material. And I think they realized that they had this amazing base of knowledge and material, and so I think they kind of started there, but then they took all the good parts from third edition, the sorcerer class, and all the neat stuff. But I kind of think basic D&D and first edition kind of evolved into second edition, and that kind of became the platform by which they evolved fifth edition. And I think they did learn a lot from fourth edition. Like, you shouldn't try to make Dungeons and Dragons into an MMORPG because it just doesn't work the same way. But I really think that we're kind of in a golden age of gaming now because of the previous lessons that we've learned.
Yeah, little failure to set up the great success.
Like Yoda says, failure the greatest teacher is.
Yeah. Do you think? When do you think 6th edition would possibly drop? What changes would you want to be
Hopefully
made?
never.
Hopefully
Yeah,
never.
I'm also in the hope. Well, I'm less in the hopefully never train, mostly because I have so far. And fifth edition has kind of broken this cycle slightly for me. But traditionally speaking, I have been at my most fun in D&D in all of the even editions. So second edition had a really great time. Third edition, things got a little much for me and I had to check out. Fourth edition, I was back, with a vengeance, having a wonderful time. Fifth edition, so far has been pretty good. But there are some changes that I would like to see that would require an edition change instead of a continuation. I personally a couple of the lessons that did not translate appropriately from 4th ed to 5th ed that I would have liked. So in 4th edition we got healing surges as a healing mechanic. Players got a number. Now in 5th edition you will recognize them as hit dice.
Yeah.
The hit dice mechanic is the healing surge mechanic from 4th edition, but needlessly randomized and not used appropriately, I think. Because in 4th edition, the healing surge mechanic was a way to heal. You would spend a healing surge to heal, like a spell would heal you. It would say that player gets to spend a healing surge and gets a little extra healing. Or something along, that's how healing kind of worked in that edition. And the players had a certain amount of healing surges, and when they ran out, they just didn't get to heal anymore. Like that was a limiter to how much healing a person could take in a day before they need to take a long rest.
I like that.
And also with that, like certain spell effects or traps or conflicts wouldn't do damage, they would take a healing surge from you. And healing surges were effectively like a quarter of your hit points. That's what they averaged out to. It didn't matter how many hit points you had. A healing surge was effectively about a quarter of your hit points. So when they moved to 5th edition, they made it like a randomized number, and it basically only ever gets used to heal you between short rests. I would like it to go back to being a scalable thing where it was effectively a set number of your hit points that grew with you as a character, and the ability to damage that pool, like use that pool as a more functional resource, whether that's through like spells that you would cast that you could feed your hit dice to make better, or enemy attacks that hurt you and then also kind of ripped away some of your ability to get health back by stealing your healing surges or hit dice. Stuff or like traps that would do the same thing. I would like to see that mechanic come back a little bit better.
Yeah.
Also, one of the lessons that was kind of one of the sacred cows that was turned into delicious hamburger, in my opinion, in 4th edition, was the Vancian magic style spell slots and spell levels. It bothers me to no end that in 4th edition we finally made it make sense to where I could be like, hey, I'm a 4th level mage. Guess what level magic I can cast? 4th level. Because I'm a 4th level mage. Whereas now in all the previous editions to then, and now back in 5th edition, your player's like, I'm a 4th level wizard. I can go look at 4th level spells, right? And you're like, no,
sorry, it's 2nd level for you.
You get to go look at 2nd level spells because that's just how the spell system works again. And that confuses new players in a way that is unnecessary, in my opinion.
One thing I think needs to be changed is surprised. I think surprise should stay a surprise round and not be a condition. Or if it is a condition, it doesn't, like, I don't know. I really like the surprise condition, losing your first turn in the initiative order. It just doesn't click with players sometimes.
No, I would rather it be maybe like a penalty to your initiative.
Yeah.
Of some kind, maybe. Losing a whole turn is one, again, it stops the momentum of the combat or the story, which you don't want to do. But like being like, hey, you're surprised. That means you move your whatever your initiative is, roll it at disadvantage, or whatever your initiative is, you're moving it, you're acting at half that number or something, just as long as they're still acting but lower on the chain.
I would give him like half movement speed and like disadvantage on attack rolls. I wouldn't just I wouldn't take him out of the round. I would just give them penalties because they're a little bit slow on the uptake,
I don't know.
It's funny that in 5th edition the whole philosophy is to try to make things more simple, but for this one thing in particular, especially surprise, they just kind of screwed the pooch on that one and just made it so convoluted and messy.
Right. And then you get all the players who are like, well, I don't want to have to deal with that, so I'm going to waste character like material to take like the feat that means I can't be surprised anymore, or go get the magic item that means I can't be surprised anymore, just so I don't have to interact with this mechanic. And then at the same time as a DM, you're like, well, if the players don't want to interact with that mechanic, do I want to interact with that mechanic? And then it just gets written out of the game, you
Oh,
know?
yes, I want to interact with that mechanic. The prize can be cool if used correctly. It makes sense narratively for there to be ambushes sometimes.
Right, but you can do that without being involved with the surprise mechanic, is what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Like, you can narratively do a surprise that seems like a fun ambush that doesn't immediately involve like that whole section of the rules.
Yeah, I think, honestly, going back to possible rule changes, I might just nix surprise rounds and just say disadvantage on attack rolls and half movement speed for surprised characters. For hostiles. I think it just makes more sense logically. Like, you're telling me that a level 15 character who's like basically a demigod at this point get react and do at least something on their turn?
Right. I don't know. Like I said, it's just one of those things where, like I said, some of the changes I want to make would honestly necessitate an edition change. But honestly, like fifth edition is the healthiest D&D has been in a long time,
Maybe ever.
maybe even ever. And I fully expect that we will continue on the fifth edition train for a while. They've gotten to the point where they've learned their lesson about like, well, I would say that they got to their point where they've learned their lesson about like overprinting splat books. As I say that, the same year they announced that this time they're cranking out like 3 or 4 books in a calendar year instead of like the 2 they were doing.
And let's be honest, that Van Richten book was not their best.
No, wasn't.
Yeah.
You have any questions for me? Flip the
As
table on
a
you.
as a newer DM, how do you feel you're doing with this new adventure that we started? You had a talk with me about kind of working through kind of like that opening narrative for your adventure. You've had lots of talks with Romulus about getting your D20 setup going.
Yeah,
Is that information like helping you feel? Are you feeling more comfortable than you would have otherwise?
definitely. Like I said, one of the greatest resources you can use is other DMs. And that doesn't just apply to D&D. You can always find information from people that are more experienced than you. It's just how experience works. So yeah, I do often consult with people that have more time in something, because it just makes logical sense. And it does help. Like, you helped me shore up any faulty plot points that I had. Romulus helped me, figure out how to do stuff. And now, when I'm looking at the same material or making new material, I can analyze and remember what you and Rom said, and hopefully make the product better than what it would have been without that information. So yeah.
All right. Well, other than that, we've definitely gone slightly over time now, but that's fine. Like that's not that big of a deal. But do we want to do our wrap up pitches and send everyone on their way?
Of course. Yeah.
Well, to review, when we hit 100 followers, we're giving away a book signed by Gary Gygax. We're only 12 of those away, so definitely follow. For those of you who are, have some subscriptions sitting in your, pile and want to send them our way, that'd be great.
Free
The
Prime
more
sub.
subscriptions we get, the cooler stuff we can hand out. Again, those of you who have Amazon Prime, you may not know this, but you have a Twitch Prime subscription. It is free for you because you're paying Amazon already for Amazon Prime, and therefore you have that you can hand out. Don't let that sit there. Give it to somebody. We would prefer you give it to us, but don't don't let Amazon get a free subscription and just sit there and not do anything with it. They've got a lot of money already, and sharing it with other people is great. Other than that, we have a Discord. We tossed the link in the chat. You can definitely hang out and do that. Oh, we did pick up a subscriber.
It was me.
Oh, wait, no, that's you.
That still counts.
Still counts.
It does count. It does count. I'm already on like month 2 of my Twitch Prime subscription.
I was saving it for this exact moment.
For this exact moment.
Yeah.
But yes, if you have a subscription, send it our way. The more we get, the cooler stuff we can bring you guys. Otherwise, I think our next thing on the docket that is going to be streamed is the Tomb of Annihilation adventure on Tuesday, right?
Yep.
Tuesday of
Annihilation.
So definitely come and see that. The party has done a level job at getting into all kinds of trouble, either through traps, monsters.
Oh, the traps.
I don't think they haven't suffered
Social
dysentery
encounters.
quite yet, but
No, they haven't quite lost the Oregon Trail.
right.
They'll never
there's
lose
still
the
time.
Oregon Trail as long as I'm alive.
There's still time to lose the Oregon Trail.
They'll never lose the Oregon Trail as long as I'm alive, unless by magical means. It's entirely possible.
I mean,
Don't tell Kyle
we'll
I
see.
said that.
Yeah, definitely go look into that. It's going to be great.
That
Other
about
than
wraps.
that, anyone else got anything else?
No, I think that about wraps it up for us today. Go ahead and join the Discord if you haven't already.